There's an ongoing discussion about the state of Florida and its stand your ground law. And this conversation started last year, of course, with the George Zimmerman Trayvon Martin case. In the worst kind of deja vu, we've been talking about this again as a result of the Michael Dunn and Jordan Davis case. There's another case that's related to stand your ground that up until now has flown largely off the radar, and it's the case of Michael Giles. Michael Giles, an Air Force veteran, was at a Tallahassee, Florida club in 2002. Fight breaks out, he goes to his car, retrieves a weapon, goes back to the club to look for his friends. According to testimony that was admitted in court, Michael Giles was not involved in any fighting. He's attacked, he pulls out his weapon, shoots his attacker in the leg. Right now, Michael Giles is sitting in prison serving a 25-year prison sentence. But there's another case that people started talking about in the wake of the George Zimmerman trial, and that is of Marissa Alexander. Marissa Alexander, black woman in Florida, who up until recently was serving a 20-year prison sentence. I hadn't heard anything about her case. The first that I came to know about it was after I saw a petition, actually a few petitions on Facebook. People were asking folks to sign a petition so that Marissa Alexander could be freed. She shouldn't have been in prison. 20-year prison sentence was harsh. She was the victim. Sign this petition and so that we can try to get Marissa Alexander free. So I didn't sign the petition. I just did an internet search on Google so that I could become familiar with the facts of the case. While I was doing that, I kept hearing and reading people say Marissa Alexander was a victim, including Melissa Harris Perry. The Huffington Post also got in on the Marissa Alexander as victim act. The facts of the case completely destroy the idea that Marissa Alexander is a victim. She is not a victim, she's a monster. Here are the facts of the case, briefly, and it gets tricky, so just kind of stay with me here. Marissa Alexander got into an argument with Rico Gray after showing Gray pictures of their newborn on her phone. She hands him the phone, goes to the bathroom. Gray goes through the pictures, looks at them, but then he starts going through her text messages. He discovers text messages from Alexander's ex-husband, Lincoln Alexander. He becomes irate, he confronts her, and he asks, among other things, is this newborn even mine, or is this his baby? Is this your ex-husband's baby? As I'm sure you can imagine, the fight became heated. Initially, Rico Gray prevented Alexander from leaving the bathroom, but eventually she was able to get out. She encountered Gray in the bedroom, the master bedroom. He leaves to go to the living room where his two sons were. So follow me here. Alexander gets out of the bathroom, leaves the master bedroom, and then leaves the house. If you feel that your life is being threatened, and you just left the house where the person who was threatening your life is, conversation over, right? You don't go back to that house. You got out, thank God, you're safe. Except that's not what Marissa Alexander did. After getting out of the house, Marissa Alexander goes to the garage, gets a weapon, and goes back into the house. She encounters Gray in the kitchen with his two sons. She fires a shot at him. This was not a warning shot in the air. No. The bullet grazed Rico Gray's head, went through the kitchen wall, and ended up in the living room ceiling. Marissa Alexander is not a victim. Rico Gray and his two sons were the victims. Gray and his two sons flee the house. They call the police. Marissa Alexander stays in the house, doesn't call anybody. But there's more. After this incident, but before trial, Marissa Alexander was ordered to stay away from Rico Gray, as you can imagine. And she swore that she would, but she didn't. She was arrested for domestic battery. This is before the trial for the previous incident. So again, the victim here is Rico Gray, not Marissa Alexander. Here's what else you need to know. Before her trial for the original incident, Marissa Alexander was offered a plea by prosecutors. The plea would have required her to serve 3 years in prison. For whatever reason, and I cannot imagine why, she rejected it. It took a jury 12 minutes to convict Marissa Alexander of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and send her to prison for a minimum of 20 years. Now, there are some people who said, you know what, maybe she did belong in prison, but not for 20 years. 20 years is just too harsh. Again, I'm not an attorney. I don't have access to court case files or any of that. I have access to the internet. So I did some reading on Florida's minimum sentencing requirements. In the state of Florida, merely brandishing a firearm in the commission of a felony crime for which you're convicted requires a minimum 10-year sentence. That's just for pulling a gun out. You fire that weapon, that's another 10-year minimum sentence. So 20 years is what the law requires she served. Frankly, I think it's a gift. Marissa Alexander could have killed Rico Gray or his two sons, one or both of his two sons. This is what could have happened when people were saying that Marissa Alexander was the victim and Marissa Alexander was the one doing the shooting. But like I said, this is not about Marissa Alexander alone. This is about the larger conversation that people are having about Florida and its stand your ground law. On Facebook and on digital news sites and in the media, like I said, with Melissa Harris Perry, there is a narrative being peddled that Florida does not apply its stand your ground laws fairly to black people. And that is bogus. It's not true. And again, and I have to reiterate this, I know this because I've done the reading. Listen to this. According to an article in the Miami Herald, a Tampa Bay Times study last year of some 200 stand your ground offenses found that 66% of the black defendants who evoked the self-defense statute at a pretrial stand your ground hearing went free. 66%. 61% of white defendants who claimed stand your ground immunities saw the charges dropped. Here's something to know about stand your ground, and I didn't know it before I did the reading either. If you're charged with first or second degree murder or manslaughter in the state of Florida, you have a right to a pretrial stand your ground hearing. If the judge finds a preponderance of evidence supports that you stood your ground, in other words, you were in a place that you legally had a right to be, and you are attacked and you feel that you are in danger of suffering grave bodily injury or death, and you respond with deadly force without retreating, you have stood your ground. If the judge finds in your favor, there is no trial. Charges dropped, case dismissed. Thank you. Keeping that in mind, 66% of black defendants who evoked the self-defense statute at pretrial stand your ground hearings went free. There is more. The Times study also found that in mixed race confrontations, 4 of the 5 blacks who killed a white person were freed after invoking stand your ground, while 5 of 6 whites who killed a black person were freed while invoking stand your ground. 4 or 5, that's 80%. So in 80% of cases in Florida, when a black person kills a white person and says, I was standing my ground, in 80% of those cases, they go free. Again, this totally destroys the idea that stand your ground in the state of Florida is anti-black. And this is something else. You know, we're talking about stand your ground. George Zimmerman nor Michael Dunn had a pretrial stand your ground hearing. So they did not go into court saying, hey, I'm innocent because I was standing my ground. That's not what happened. Like I said, all of this matters because the conversation that's going on right now doesn't just stay on Facebook. Okay? Melissa Harris Perry, who has hundreds of thousands of viewers, is spreading false information and distortions. And this is informing the conversation that people are having about this. And don't kid yourselves, the Governor Scott and the people who work for him hear these conversations. And you know what? They know most people do not know what they are talking about. You're ignorant of the facts of the case. That's not a criticism, it's an observation, and it is true. You do not know what you're talking about. And defending Marissa Alexander because she is black and because she is a woman and you feel that she was a victim and that she shouldn't be in prison and that 20 years was too harsh when you don't know what you're talking about makes you sound like an idiot. Marissa Alexander is a monster. Prison is where she belongs. Hats off to Angela Corey for retrying her case. I would be willing to bet good money that when her case is retried, she's going to end up in prison again, and good for her because that is where she belongs. The people we should be rallying around are Rico Gray and his 2 sons, not Marissa Alexander.